At 0212 at Al-Assad Air Base in Iraq's Anbar province, a maintenance sergeant is walking a flashlight down a row of parked Apaches when the CRAM cupola above him spins to life on its own. 4 kilometers east, an IRGC-backed militia cell has just triggered a salvo of 122 mm rockets from the back of 3 flatbed trucks. 12 rounds, arcing up together 30 seconds from impact. Inside the base ops center, the counter-rocket radar has already stacked all 12 tracks before the first alarm finishes its second cycle. The drill runs itself. Weapons free, fire circuits closed, the phalanx guns spin up their Gatling barrels before the sergeant even reaches the bunker door. Across the flight line, the rest of Al-Assad wakes up in fragments. A fuel Bowser driver drops his hose mid-fill and dives under his own truck. A crew chief flattens a comms cable cart sprinting for cover. 900 Americans go from sleeping to sheltering in under 40 seconds. Every one of them is now betting on a machine that has to think faster than the rockets fall. Inside the CRAM shelter, the operators get one advantage. A rocket, once its motor burns dry, is a promise. No guidance, no course correction, just a parabola written in physics the instant the fuel runs out. The radar reads all 12 arcs in under 2 seconds and ranks them by which ones actually land inside the wire. The disadvantage is the same one it's always been. 30 seconds is nothing. 30 seconds is a coffee break that has to also save a base. The Phalanx CIWS, repurposed off a warship's hull for exactly this fight, doesn't fire missiles. It fires a wall. 6 barrels, 4,500 rounds a minute, 20 millimeters tungsten penetrators chewed into a cone of denial that the rocket has to fly through to reach anything worth hitting. No warhead, no proximity fuse, no seeker chasing heat. Just enough metal in the air that geometry does the killing. 8 rockets tumble apart mid-flight, shredded into scrap that rains down harmlessly on empty desert north of the runway. The gun crews don't cheer. There's no time. 4 rockets are still falling, and the guns are already re-slewing onto the next stack of tracks. 2 more come apart over the perimeter berm. 1 overshoots the base entirely, burying itself in an empty field a kilometer past the fence. The last one doesn't miss. At 0213, it lands on a hardstand between 2 fuel bladders. The blast throws a sheet of orange 30 feet into the dark, and for a moment the whole flight line is lit like daylight. 3 soldiers go down near the impact crater. A quiet base in Anbar becomes, in 1 second, the reason for everything that follows. Iran didn't invent this playbook tonight. It's been running variations of it for years. Proxy rockets, plausible deniability, a bruise delivered by someone else's hands. But this time the salvo carries an IRGC fingerprint too clean to argue with. Signals intelligence picked up the launch order 40 minutes before the rockets left the tubes, routed through a Quds Force liaison cell operating 15 kilometers from the launch site. Someone in Tehran decided a message needed sending. They just aimed it at the wrong audience. By 0300, the wounded are wheels up on a C-130 bound for Landstuhl. By 0400, the target list that's been sitting in a folder for 18 months stops being theoretical. 600 miles south, in the Gulf of Oman, the answer is already moving before the sun comes up. The USS Gerald R. Ford Carrier Strike Group has been holding station in international waters for 11 days, ostensibly a routine presence patrol. Nothing about tonight is routine anymore. On the flight deck, yellow shirts wave FA-18 Super Hornets into position under a sky still black at the edges. Below decks, ordnance crews are already rolling AGM-158 JASSMER cruise missiles out of the magazine on trolleys, because the strike package assembling itself doesn't wait for daylight to look dramatic. It just needs range, and range is the one thing a carrier air wing never runs short of. 200 miles north, 3 Arleigh Burke-class destroyers reposition without being told twice. Their vertical launch systems hold 96 cells apiece, and by 0430, those cells are running through pre-launch checklists that normally take days, compressed into 40 minutes. The Tomahawk land attack missile doesn't care about compression. It's flown this exact profile in simulation 1,000 times. Pop out of the tube, ignite the booster, drop the booster, level off on the turbojet, and start following a terrain map baked into its memory since before it ever left port. A missile that memorized the ground so it wouldn't have to ask directions. The target isn't one building, it's a list, and the list has been alive for a year, updated every time a new satellite pass caught a new bunker door or a new radar dish. IRGC command and control nodes, rocket artillery depots feeding the militia network, a Quds Force liaison compound outside of Oz that intelligence has watched grow from 3 buildings to 11. None of it glamorous. All of it the plumbing that let 12 rockets leave a truck bed in the middle of the night and land on Americans who were folding laundry an hour earlier. At 05:12, the first wave leaves the rails. 60 Tomahawks in 11 minutes, staggered by seconds so the impacts don't announce each other early. Each missile flies its own corridor, hugging terrain, threading between known radar coverage gaps mapped out months in advance by aircraft nobody officially confirms exist. A single missile is a needle. 60 of them, arriving inside a 90-second window from 6 different bearings, is a wall with no seam in it. Iranian air defense picks up the first inbound tracks at 05:18. By then, it's already a math problem with no clean answer. The Bavar 373 batteries ringing Tehran are built to fight aircraft and ballistic arcs, big radar-reflective threats with predictable geometry. A Tomahawk skimming a wadi at 500 feet doesn't look like either. It looks like ground clutter until the last 4 seconds, and 4 seconds isn't a firing solution, it's barely a warning. 3 interceptors do get off the rails near a command node outside Kermanshah, chasing missiles that are already past the intercept envelope by the time the launcher finishes its own targeting cycle. All 3 go wide. The math that worked for a slow-moving rocket over Al-Assad doesn't work in reverse. A 90-second warning gets you nothing when the thing arriving spent its whole flight profile designed around denying you exactly that warning. At 05:21, the compound outside of Oz stops existing as 11 buildings and becomes a single column of dust visible on thermal from 40 miles out. The rocket depot feeding the militia cells goes next, a chain of secondary explosions that keeps cooking off for 6 full minutes after the first missile lands, because whoever stacked that inventory never planned for someone finding all of it in one night. Not every Tomahawk finds an empty target. At a coastal radar site south of Bandar-e-Bushehr, an IRGC operator has spent 4 years learning the same trick as every other survivor of modern strike warfare. Silence buys time that power never does. His early warning set has been running at a fraction of rated output for 6 hours, painting just enough of the sky to keep a picture without lighting up every anti-radiation seeker in the Gulf. It's not enough. A Tomahawk doesn't hunt radar emissions. It hunts coordinates baked in before it ever left the tube, and this site made that list 11 months ago after a satellite pass caught its dish pointed the wrong way at the wrong hour. At 05:19, the missile arrives low and flat off the water, and the operator's last transmission is a half-second warning that never makes it past his own building. Overhead, a second strike element is already threading a needle the Tomahawks were never built to thread. 4 F-35I variants, flying a corridor stitched together from 3 different countries' worth of quiet cooperation, cross into Iranian airspace at 05:25 without a single Iranian radar operator getting a clean return. The jet's radar cross-section is measured in the same ballpark as a golf ball, and at this altitude, in this lighting, a golf ball moving at 550 knots doesn't register as anything worth a second look on a screen already crowded with the debris of everything else happening tonight. Their target isn't on the cruise missile list, because it was never sitting still long enough to earn a fixed coordinate. A mobile IRGC Air Defense Command node, the vehicle that would normally be queuing exactly the kind of interceptors that just went wide over Kermanshah, has spent the last 3 hours displacing between prepared positions outside Shiraz, exactly the tactic that's kept Iranian mobile assets alive against strikes for the better part of 2 decades. Tonight, it doesn't matter. The lead F-35's electro-optical targeting system has been tracking the vehicle's heat signature since it stopped moving 9 minutes earlier, patient in a way a satellite pass never can be. A single GBU-39 small-diameter bomb drops from an internal weapons bay that never breaks the aircraft's stealth profile, and the vehicle that was supposed to be the eyes for Iran's entire southern air defense network stops transmitting at 05:28. No siren, no scramble, just a truck that goes dark mid-sentence. The 4 jets are back over open water inside 11 minutes, never showing up on a single Iranian scope as anything but static. But cruise missiles only close half the account. The other half needs eyes on the ground that a Tomahawk doesn't have, because some targets don't sit still long enough for a pre-programmed flight path to find them. That job belongs to what's already airborne and orbiting quietly 100 miles offshore, engines throttled back, waiting for exactly this call. Two MQ-9 Reapers have been flying a racetrack pattern over the Iran-Iraq border corridor for 6 hours before the rockets ever left their tubes, watching a stretch of highway that intelligence flagged as a resupply route for exactly the kind of mobile launcher that hit Al-Assad. At 4:30, ground movement lights up on the sensor feed. A flatbed truck, canvas-covered load, moving without headlights along a service road that has no reason to see traffic at that hour. The Reaper's synthetic aperture radar strips away the dark and the canvas both, and underneath sits the unmistakable rectangular silhouette of a second rocket rail, reloading for round 2. The strike authority comes back in under 4 minutes. A single Hellfire drops off the rail, riding a laser designator that's been painting the truck bed since the moment it was confirmed. The missile doesn't announce itself. No engine roar from a truck's eye view, nothing but a streak that closes the last half mile in under 2 seconds. The flatbed disappears into a fireball that lights up half a kilometer of empty road, and whatever crew was riding with that launcher never gets the chance to fire it a second time. This is the quiet half of the operation. The part that doesn't make for dramatic gun camera footage because it's designed not to. One truck, one missile, one less rocket ever aimed at another American base. Not everyone in the region is content to watch from a bunker. At 05:45, 40 miles off the coast near Bandar Abbas, the IRGC Navy answers the only way its doctrine ever taught it to: swarm and speed instead of steel and tonnage. 11 PAC-class fast attack craft pour out of a hidden inlet in a loose wedge formation, throttles buried, bowspray cutting white lines across water that's still dark. Each boat is barely large enough to carry its crew and a pair of torpedo tubes, built cheap and fast on the theory that a $2 million patrol craft doesn't need to survive an engagement. It only needs to force an American warship to spend a $2 million missile proving it can sink one. The destroyer USS Paul Hamilton, screening the northern edge of the strike group's operating box, picks the formation up on surface search radar at 05:48, 18 miles out and closing at speed. The tactical picture that unfolds over the next 4 minutes is the oldest math in naval warfare, rewritten for small boats instead of battleships. Numbers against precision, mass against range. Bridge-to-bridge radio challenges go out on the international hailing frequency and get answered with nothing but the boats holding formation and holding course, straight at the destroyer's beam. At 6 miles, the Hamilton's 5-inch gun crews have already been tracking for 2 minutes, and the Mark 45 mount doesn't wait for the range to close any further. The first rounds land short, throwing up geysers of white water. The lead boats swerve around without breaking formation. It's a warning shot, dressed up as a fire mission, the kind every captain in the 5th Fleet has rehearsed 100 times in exercises nobody outside the Navy ever hears about. This time, the swarm doesn't take the hint. At 4 miles, 2 boats peel off the formation's flank, angling for a torpedo run that would put them inside minimum safe range in under 90 seconds. The Hamilton's close-in defenses shift from warning to intercept without anyone needing to say the word out loud. A pair of Hellfire missiles, fired from a helicopter that's been shadowing the swarm since it first cleared the inlet, arrive within seconds of each other. Both flanking boats disappear into columns of spray and burning fuel, and the remaining 9 reverse course as one, the kind of instant, wordless retreat that only happens when a formation has just watched its own arithmetic fail in real time. 2 boats bought nothing. The rest turn for home with the lesson already learned. By 0600, the smoke over Avaz has started drifting east on the morning wind, and Tehran's answer is still being written. Iranian state media hasn't confirmed casualties yet. They don't need to. The silence on the usual channels says enough. What they can't hide is the second target, the one American planners have been saving for exactly this scenario, the one that turns a punitive strike into a message with teeth. 40 miles southwest of Isfahan, under a mountain that's been photographed by satellite more times than most tourist landmarks, sits a centrifuge hall Iran spent a decade burying deeper every time a new intelligence estimate leaked. Not the crown jewel, that one's dug in far deeper, reserved for a conversation nobody wants to have yet, but a working facility close enough to the surface that a different tool altogether can reach it. At 0630, 2 B-2 Spirits that left Whiteman Air Force Base 14 hours earlier, refueled twice over open ocean by tankers that never file a flight plan anyone talks about, cross into position at altitude. Each carries 2 GBU-57 massive ordnance penetrators in its bays, 30,000 pounds of hardened steel and explosive built for exactly one job: going through rock that laughs at anything smaller. The bomb doesn't explode on contact. It's not supposed to. It's built to survive the first several hundred feet of stone and concrete, absorbing impacts that would shatter a lesser casing, and only wake up once its accelerometer confirms it's stopped decelerating the way open air stops nothing at all. The bomb bay doors open in silence 4 miles up. Nobody on the ground hears the release. There's no warning siren this time, no scramble, no crew running for cover, because the people meant to be alarmed by this one don't get the courtesy of 30 seconds. The first penetrator buries itself into the mountainside and keeps going, punching through layer after layer of overburden that Iranian engineers spent years reinforcing against smaller weapons. It finds the ceiling of the hall roughly 4 seconds later and detonates on the far side of resistance, the way a fuse counting floors instead of seconds is built to. The second bomb, dropped 90 seconds behind the first to widen the wound, finishes what the opening shot started. From the surface, nothing dramatic happens at all. No fireball, no mushroom of debris climbing into the dawn sky. Just a tremor that registers on seismic sensors as far away as Baku, and a mountain that settles a few inches lower than it stood the night before. The quiet ones are always the worst ones. A bunker buster doesn't need to look impressive. It needs the room underneath to stop existing, and by 0632, it has. By mid-morning, the picture from orbit tells the story better than any statement will. 11 buildings outside of Oz, reduced to foundations and ash. A stretch of highway marked by a single burned-out flatbed and a scorch pattern nobody's bothering to hide. A mountainside near Isfahan that looks unchanged from a mile up and catastrophically altered from 6 feet under. 60 cruise missiles, 1 Hellfire, and 4 bunker-busting bombs. A fraction of the ordnance available to a strike group that could have kept going for a week and barely touched its magazine depth. Iran's Supreme National Security Council convenes before noon. State television runs footage of the Al-Assad rocket strike on loop, framing the barrage as a defensive necessity against American presence in the region, careful never to mention the 11 buildings that no longer exist a few hundred miles from Tehran. Regional proxies go quiet across 3 countries simultaneously, the kind of silence that isn't peace, just recalculation. Every militia cell that's been feeding rockets across the Iraqi border for the better part of 2 years just watched what happens to the supply chain that arms them, and the ones still standing are doing math on how many links in that chain survive scrutiny they weren't planning on this soon. At Al-Assad, the wounded are stable. The base commander authorizes a full casualty assessment by 1100, and the after-action brief runs longer than the attack itself, because 30 seconds of incoming fire generates hours of paperwork, and one very specific lesson relearned the hard way. The CRAM buys time, not immunity. 8 rockets destroyed out of 12 isn't a failure. It's the arithmetic of point defense against saturation fire, the same arithmetic that decided a war a generation ago, and hasn't changed since. Somebody always gets through. The job was never stopping everything. It was surviving the one that doesn't stop. 3,000 miles away, in a briefing room that doesn't officially exist on any public schedule, the strike package's after-action report gets 1 line added at the bottom before it's filed. Objective achieved. Escalation risk assessed as contained. Nobody in that room believes contained means finished. Iran spent years building a doctrine around proxies and plausible deniability precisely because it worked, because it let Tehran throw punches without ever standing close enough to take one back. That doctrine survived a lot of American administrations. It didn't survive this morning intact. By 1400, Gulf shipping lanes that quietly rerouted overnight start easing back toward normal traffic, but insurance desks in London have already adjusted the risk premium on anything flying a flag near the Strait of Hormuz. Markets read the strike the way markets read everything, not as justice, not as retaliation, just as a variable that changes the price of oil for exactly as long as the uncertainty lasts. By closing bell, crude is up 4% and holding. At the Pentagon, the day unfolds in the language every strike eventually gets translated into: slide decks. Battle damage assessment photos move from a classified server to a briefing room projector in under 6 hours. Each image annotated with a coordinate, a timestamp, and a 1-line summary that flattens 4 minutes of missile flight time into a bullet point. The room that authorized the target list 18 months ago is the same room reviewing whether it worked, and by early afternoon the answer sitting in front of them is close enough to unambiguous that nobody spends long arguing about it. 91% of aim points confirmed destroyed. 2 rocket artillery caches unaccounted for, flagged for a second look once the smoke clears enough for a clean satellite pass. 0 American aircraft lost. 2 IRGC fast boats sunk against a swarm of 11 that turned back rather than press a fight it had already lost the arithmetic on. None of it gets announced the way Al-Assad's rocket barrage did, on state television within the hour, framed for a domestic audience that needs an enemy to explain a bad morning. The American side of this exchange mostly just stops being talked about publicly, the way it usually does, filed under an operation name that will surface in a congressional briefing months from now and nowhere else in the meantime. That asymmetry is its own kind of message. One side needed the world to see this happen. The other side didn't need anyone to see anything at all. It only needed it to be true.